View or gallery? Should he be doing view or gallery?
Yeah, gallery can do.
Gallery.
What is this clicking? I think it's your computer clicking. Yeah. Oh, yeah, you will be not talking unless.
Yeah, I won't be talking. No, but I'll have everything ready if I have to jump on, but I don't envision having
Yeah,
to.
you better connect it because it's clicking if you put sound.
I'll just turn off.
Okay, I begin music.
Welcome everyone. Welcome all to this series of webinars in celebration of Mothers and Auroville's birth anniversary. This series continues from the 21st of February until the 28th of February, Auroville's birth anniversary, and is a part of the Auroville Festival hosted by Auroville Foundation in collaboration with the La Grace Center, USA. Let us come together in a moment of sacred silence. Let us all take a moment of silence. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. We are honored to have with us today our keynote speakers, Vladimir, who's also one of my teachers and the one who actually introduced me to Savitri. We have Don Salmon with us. And our third speaker is Professor Goutam Ghosal, who hasn't been able to join us today, but we would be playing a video of him. All three of them would be addressing the topic Savitri, the Cradle of the Overman. Savitri is Sri Aurobindo's life's core work, the mantra for transformation of the world, the power of word. So that is what we are going to be talking about today. We shall begin today's webinar with Professor Ghosal's video. Before we play the video, let me introduce to you about Professor Ghosal. Poet and critic Goutam Ghosal is a professor of English who has served Vishwa Bharati Shanti Niketan for over 3 decades. Apart from Sri Aurobindo and Rabindranath Tagore, his other areas of interest are 19th century British and American literature and post-colonial studies. Ghosal's major books include Sri Aurobindo's prose style, Sri Aurobindo and world literature, notes on the mother's prayers and meditations, and Rainbow Bridge, a comparative study of Tagore and Sri Aurobindo. Ghosal was awarded Nolani Kanta Gupta Puruskar in 2009 and Sri Aurobindo Puruskar in 2012. In this video, Professor Goutam Ghosal will speak about the mind of light, the Overman, and why, according to Sri Aurobindo, poetry is the divine Agni. He will also elaborate on the Rig Veda behind the source of inspiration for Sri Aurobindo and Tagore. Now we shall move forward to watch the video of Professor Goutam Ghosal.
So this issue of the mind of light, I think, has been too much stressed. Although Mr. Deshpande has spoken, written, in fact, excellently on the topic, clarifying the things, but I don't think Sri Aurobindo was unaware in 1926 about this issue of mind and light, mind of light. And then the mother asked him to write in 1949 about the mind of light, and he obliged. And talking of the supermind and overmind distinctions, we have to refer to Sri Aurobindo's poetry, his overhead aesthetics, on which K.D. Setna has written at length, explained. Why is poetry so important? Because Sri Aurobindo places poetry at the center of knowledge as the divine Agni of the Rig Veda, the purifying fire. And that is the importance of mantras and different kind of mantras and that have become very popular these days, thanks to a new kind of rising, sometimes in the wrong way they have sprung up. But there is a return, and also the aspect of the Aryan civilization, which the leftist historians, they deny. Sri Aurobindo says, I can't speak of the date of the composition of these verses. They are dateless. Maybe 10,000, 12,000 years ago. And recently, maybe 5 or 6 years back, NASA has taken a picture of a broken bridge linking Sri Lanka and India, Rameswaram. So that, and they have measured the time, 7,000 years back the bridge was built. And Sri Aurobindo says you can't say when these rishis spoke of the fire symbolism. So fire is extremely important, and it comes in the poetry of Tagore again and again, because both Tagore and Sri Aurobindo have the same sources, the Rig Veda. And the fire comes from there, the immortal fire, of which Sri Aurobindo speaks again and again in his poetry, sometimes flame, sometimes fire, sometimes with brightness. And the fire comes again and again. Aguner porosh muni chhuao prane e jibon punno koro. So this is what Tagore says. And so when you speak of a transformation of consciousness or an evolution from man to the next species, they speak of an intermediary, and I think that is a bit too much stressed, because that is too natural. Sri Aurobindo only clarified in 1949 that, well, some people will come with, some can see, in Savitri he says, some can have a glimpse and some can have a feeling. And he has given enough clues about this mind of light in the future poetry. So poetry is something which is extremely important in this transformation, and that comes from an inspiration, and Sri Aurobindo has given us the gradations of that, and he has characterized specifically what is the higher mind like, and it relates to thought, higher thought. And what is the illumined mind? It gives you a bright lights and colors. And then intuition is like a sudden spot, a focus on something. And then the overmind, which is the linking. Now the point is, when you speak of the overman or the mind of light, that is the physical mind catching the light, Sri Aurobindo has spoken again and again, talking of on poetry, that there are plenty of things from the supermind which percolates, which drips down to the overmind. So many of the supermind principles are already there in the overmind. Overmind is not delinked from the supermind. Of course, it does not have that supreme vision. And even in the supermind stage, you must have noted that when Sri Aurobindo speaks in his great little book, he uses a very interesting phrase, the highest supermind. So even the supermind has gradations till it reaches the Satchidananda. So many of these because the supermind cannot be expressed in terms of human language. So human language can express it in poetry through the overmind. The Gita was consistently written from the overmind. But also it means when you are a poet, you can catch the overmind from time to time and you can express it, but you cannot leave it out throughout your life. By Overman, Sri Aurobindo and the mother are meaning people who will constantly live in the overmind, will constantly be the overman, not just in the lines which they write. They will leave out these lines. Like there is a song by Tagore on the night sky and the stars. And in the middle part, the entire song is mantric. The entire song, as Setna has clarified to me, I can sense during our long talks with K.D. Setna that I can I can characterize what it is and what it is like. So in vernaculars, in the regional languages, we have this in the Sufi poets, in Shakil Badayani, you have this. पिचकारियों में रंग भरा प्यार है उस रंग में जीवन रंग लो. So there is as he writes to Setna, there is an unusual and unexpected arrangement of words, an inspired selection. These are some supplements he used to characterize mantra. He couldn't characterize mantra in the future poetry. So this has to be kept in mind, that you are not just uttering the mantras or overmind poetry or poetry from very high intuition. That is also mantra. But you are living out the stuff in your life permanently. That is the intermediary race. The other thing is, we in Pondicherry or in Auroville, of course we are very fond, we are attached to Auroville and Pondicherry. We tend to believe or we imagine that the Overman will be seen only in Pondicherry and Auroville. No. It can be anywhere in the world, because Sri Aurobindo and the mother were speaking of the world. The Overman appearing in the world, not in Pondicherry and Auroville. Well, they might come here, they might not. And like when the descent came in 1956, Setna was outside the ashram, he felt it, he saw the light. So this is the point we have to remember, that when we take up Savitri, we have to be extremely careful and we have to read it with reference to his theory, and the theory is incomplete in the future poetry. You have to supplement it with the letters on Setna, and then you have to see that this intermediary race, sparks of which have come out in poetry, that will be made permanent in the lives of these people. This is all about this Overman, and the link, because I have specifically pointed out, I repeat once again that there are two mistakes, two major mistakes. One school, the young students, they believe that, well, we can do future poetry and the letters, and we can write on Sri Aurobindo's poetry with quoting here and there from Savitri a few lines. We can do that. You can't do that. You have to read the Life Divine and Essays on the Gita. So only when we read Essays on the Gita and the Life Divine, I specifically mean to these books, these two books. When I speak of human unity and the self-determination, we go to war and self-determination and the ideal of human unity. And Sanatana Dharma is also a totally different concept. It is not which any political party preaches. Sri Aurobindo's clarification is totally different. He says, anyone who feels that the God is seated inside my soul, he is practicing Sanatana Dharma. And the problem with Aurobindo Ghosh and Sri Aurobindo is this. There was no major problem, although yoga totally changed his language. The change is in the language. There was a drastic change in the language from 1909. You leave 1909, there's a gap. From 1914, you can once again see Sri Aurobindo's major writings. Between these 4 or 5 years, there is a drastic change of language. So if you come to his concept of nationalism even nationalism was perfectly envisioned by as Aurobindo Ghosh, but he could not articulate properly. The language came to him later. That is why he often said, no, don't refer to Kolkata writings. Quite often he said, because the language was not. Language means a lot. And in the future poetry, there is only one reference to the overmind. Can you believe it? It is the source of the mantra. So you have to take the whole of his, and I also don't exclude the human cycle, because that is the social evolution of society. That is a miraculous, marvelous book, The Human Cycle. And I think I'm trying to push it everywhere. And how he has left behind Marx and other sociologists in search of something new, something better, and the perfect correlation between individual and society, which is now the crux of the problem in Auroville. The perfect assortment or fusion or harmony between the individual and society. Both have to sacrifice a bit. And you can't ignore anybody. You can't give an extra stress on the individual. Neither you can ignore the individual. As Bertrand Russell, he put an extreme stress on the individual. So Sri Aurobindo goes far ahead of them, both Russell and Marx, and he said, no, the individual and the society will be perfectly harmonized and both of them will be free. And that is to be seen. It is not yet materialized. We can just think of these things. And things are moving in the right direction. More and more people from the West are coming, and even they are more receptive. Like I heard, he told Tagore, when Tagore asked him, I'm going to Europe, people are listening to me, why don't you come out and go to Europe? Then I heard Sri Aurobindo answered softly, Europe will come to me if she needs it. So that's all for today. I'm not well. And I'm very sorry, because Don Solomon is such a great scholar, and Vlad is such a great friend and such a great scholar. Both are, I respect both of them, and it would have been a great pleasure to share the dais with them. But it is just my bad luck, I'm not keeping well. Otherwise, it is a great temptation to speak alongside Vlad and Don Solomon. They are great scholars. I'm sorry, but whatever I know a little, I have spoken to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Here is a little quotation by the mother where she says that Sri Aurobindo has crammed the whole universe in a single book. The whole universe in a single book. Savitri is a marvelous work magnificent, and of an incomparable perfection. Indeed, Savitri is something concrete, living. It is all replete, packed with consciousness. It is the supreme knowledge above all human philosophies and religions. It is the spiritual path. It is yoga, tapasya, sadhana, everything in its single body. Savitri has an extraordinary power. It gives out vibrations for him who can receive them, the true vibrations of each stage of consciousness, the mother. So on that note, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Vladimir. And also the reason why I read out this quotation is because it is through Vladimir that I, for the very first time, experienced a glimpse of these true vibrations that Mother is talking about. I remember when Vladimir introduced to us the student Savitri, just the sparkle in his eye, how much he loved Savitri, adored Savitri, worshipped Savitri. I think that really touched me very, very deeply. And how he could take us through an entire spectrum from an admiration from the story within Mahabharata of how this is one of the stories where, unlike most of the legends, here, the prediction of a rishi that doesn't come true, or rather is challenged. Usually that never happens. If somebody as powerful as Narada predicts something, that usually in a story comes true and it is justified, but in Savitri that doesn't happen. And and how Savitri challenged the Lord of Death and gave that last battle for the divine victory to happen. So what I really saw, in the introduction that Vladimir gave to us about Savitri was this entire spectrum of love for the story to its higher and deeper divine significance. So on that note, introducing Vladimir, the director of the Institute for Applied Research and Integral Studies at the La Grace Center, USA. He holds a master's degree in general and theoretical linguistics and Sanskrit language and literature and a PhD in Indian philosophy. He's a scholar and instructor of Sanskrit and an educator and researcher in Vedic and Vedantic studies. Today, what he will be talking to us is about Savitri, the life work of Sri Aurobindo, a legend and a symbol. As a legend, it is narrated in Mahabharata by Markandeya Rishi, the ever young immortal being to Yudhishthira. But as a symbol, it represents the whole vision of creation. And like I said, the final battle of the light with darkness, love with death, fought the soul of humanity, resulting in a higher conquest of spiritual realization. Vladimir shall highlight some of the major points of this ancient symbolism in his discussion. With that, I hand it over to you, Vladimir.
Thank you, Divyanshi. Yes, it's a profound work of Sri Aurobindo, and of course it is a leading light for all of us and for the future. And the importance of this work is also evident from the point of view of the depth of historical consciousness, because it starts from the beginning of time, from Markandeya's story, who he is from the beginning of this kalpa, received the boon of immortality from Shiva, and he, the one who created the whole Markandeya Purana with Devi Mahatmya, very well known in India, which Mother uses as mantras for herself to invoke Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu. It is Markandeya, and he in Mahabharata tells the story about Savitri. So he is the worshipper of the Divine Mother, tells the story about the Divine Mother from the beginning of time. And Sri Aurobindo says that this story, though it is a tale, a story taken from Mahabharata, belongs to the Vedic cycle. And I wanted to highlight, because of my time is limited today, and I wanted to highlight only one aspect of this story. I wanted to take a symbolism of it and to show few important thoughts or insights which I received from this story, to share with you my insights, as it were. So I will make a projection. I prepared a PowerPoint presentation, and I will take few slides from it. So as we know, in the mother's story of creation, there were 4 emanations, and this was consciousness in light, bliss, truth, and life. And when they were given the task to manifest the divine, to create the world, they started to do it on their own terms, assuming that they were the supreme, and thus they disconnected from the supreme and started to fall into their opposites. So consciousness in light fell into the darkness. Here is the symbol. This is the picture by Huta. So the consciousness in light falls into its total opposite, darkness. Bliss turns into suffering, truth into a falsehood, and life, finally, the existence, into death. It's quite interesting because the whole order of their fall is also important. The light of knowledge or a light of consciousness has to fall first, and then it drags the bliss into suffering, which drags the truth into falsehood, and it becomes the foundation for the very life, eternal life of the Supreme, to turn into death. So these are 4 emanations, and as you know, Sri Aurobindo, when he explains the symbol in his letter, he tells us about 4 major personalities of the story. And here it is, I'm quoting from him. Satyavan is the soul carrying the divine truth of being within itself, but descended into the grip of death and ignorance. Savitri is the divine word, daughter of the sun, goddess of the supreme truth, who came down and is born to save. Ashvapati, the lord of the horse, the human father, her human father, is the lord of tapasya, the concentrated energy of spiritual endeavor that helps us to rise from the mortal to the immortal planes. And Dyumatsena, lord of the shining hosts, father of Satyavan, is the divine mind, here fallen blind, losing its celestial kingdom of vision, and through that loss its kingdom of glory. Still, this is not a mere allegory. The characters are not personified qualities, but incarnations or emanations of living and conscious forces with whom we can enter into concrete touch. And they take human bodies in order to help man and show him the way from his mortal state to a divine consciousness and immortal life. So this is the symbolism we want to look into. And it's quite interesting that these are the 4 major personalities which represent exactly these fallen emanations, if you look at them one by one. The light, the knowledge, the consciousness falls into the darkness. The Dyumatsena becomes blind and loses his kingdom here. celestial kingdom. Ashwapati, it's quite interesting how it is described in Mahabharata. He had everything and was loved by everyone. He had his kingdom, but he didn't have progeny. He didn't have sons. He didn't have a future. And he suffered a lot, as it is said. Santapam upajagmivan in Mahabharata. He suffered a lot. He had suffering because he had no future. And so here they are, two personalities, the light of consciousness and the bliss who suffered. And finally, the two other personalities, Savitri and Satyavan. So I wanted to highlight these four personalities as the actions of the divine consciousness upon these fallen beings, bringing them back to their self-awareness. So Savitri here is to bring the truth, to convert falsehood and bring the truth into action. And truth, as we know it, is the supermind, Vijnana. And that will generate a totally new situation for all of us, that death will be turned into life. And we will have the immortality of the soul. So, without further ado, I would like to go straight to the boons as they are described in Sri Aurobindo's Savitri. And it is amazing because in Sri Aurobindo's Savitri, when Savitri receives these boons, she gets first an indication from the Supreme what the Supreme is ready to give her. And she hears this word of the Supreme, and then she chooses the boon, which was already, as it were, given to her. It's an amazing kind of simultaneous event. Look at this. The Supreme says, she hears the voice, choose, spirit, thy supreme choice not given again. For now from my highest being looks at thee, the nameless, formless peace, where all things rest. Look at this beautiful proposal. The nameless, formless peace, where all things rest, is looking at thee. And silently the woman's heart replied, thy peace, O Lord, a boon within to keep amid the roar and ruin of wild time, for the magnificent soul of man on earth. And then she adds, very interesting line, thy calm, O Lord, that bears the hands of joy. I want to comment on this last line. So first she chooses the peace. This is the boon to Dyumatsena. You know the story, so I will not repeat the story. Savitri asks from Yama boon by she has request first of the sight of Dyumatsena, then the kingdom for Dyumatsena. The third boon is the 100 sons for Ashwapati, which he wanted at the beginning when he was doing his tapasya. And then she asks for 100 sons for her and Satyavan, and finally the life of Satyavan. So she asks actually not 4 boons, though my presentation is about 4 boons, but she asks 5 boons. And the 2 boons belong to Dyumatsena himself. That is his sight and his kingdoms. So here in Sri Aurobindo, it is kind of inbuilt. It is suggested, very subtly suggested, thy peace. That is the realization of Purusha, or separation of Purusha from Prakriti, that silent Brahman which he received first, his realization, Mukti. And the second one, thy calm, O Lord, that bears the hands of joy, is actually a psychic realization. And these two actually can belong to this first psychic transformation in Sri Aurobindo's yoga. So when there is the mukti and the psychic coming to the front. And that is Dyumatsena, because Dyumatsena is the father of Satyavan, of the soul of man. The second boon belongs to Ashvapati. She asked for 100 sons for Ashvapati, and let us look into it. A second time the eternal cry arose, wide open are the ineffable gates in front. My spirit leans down to break the knot of earth. Amorous of oneness, without thought or sign, to cast down wall and fence, to strip heaven bare, see with the large eye of infinity, unweave the stars, and into silence pass. Amorous of oneness without thought or sign, to cast down wall and fence, to strip heaven bare. This is the gift of oneness which Ashvapati was looking for. He wanted to have 100 sons. 100 sons is the symbol of the infinity of manifestation here on earth, of that spiritual transformation when one sees oneself in all and all in oneself. And then the voice comes out, the call from Savitri. In an immense and world-destroying pause, she heard a million creatures cry to her. A million creatures, the whole world cries to her. They are kind of echoing with her request to the Supreme, which he offered already. Through the tremendous stillness of her thoughts, immeasurably the woman's nature spoke. And this is also very beautiful. The woman's nature spoke. The whole Prakriti with all the millions creatures spoke. Thy oneness, Lord. In many approaching hearts, my sweet infinity of thy numberless souls. This is the spiritual realization which Shobhan had in Alipur jail, where he saw in everything and everyone the presence of the Supreme. And then comes the most mysterious boon, the boon for Savitri. Having 100 sons, those pioneers, sun-eyed pioneers for the future of mankind. The supramental transformation. Mightily retreating like a sea in ebb. A third time swelled the great admonishing call. I spread abroad the refuge of my wings. I spread abroad the refuge of my wings. Abroad is an important word from the transcendental. Out of its incommunicable deeps, my power looks forth of mightiest splendor, stilled into its majesty of sleep, withdrawn above the dreadful whirlings of the world. The transcendental supermind. And Savitri, a sob of things, was answer to the voice, and passionately the woman's heart replied, Thy energy, Lord, to seize on woman and man, to take all things and creatures in their grief and gather them into a mother's arms. And this is how Savitri is manifested. The Divine Mother is manifested through the supramental change. She takes all woman and all women and men into her arms. And that is energy, the supramental energy which was always lacking. And that's why nothing could be transformed here in the physical without the supermind. Only with this energy it can change. And finally, the fourth boon, solemn and distant like a seraph's lyre. A last great time, the wandering sound was heard. I opened the wide eye of solitude to uncover the voiceless rapture of my bliss, where in a pure and exquisite hush it lies, motionless in its slumber of ecstasy, resting from the sweet madness of the dance, out of whose beat the throb of hearts was born, the Anandamaya Purusha, the transcendental Ananda. Breaking the silence with appeal and cry, a hymn of adoration tireless climbed, a music beat of winged uniting souls. Then all the woman yearningly replied, thy embrace, which rends the living knot of pain, thy joy, O Lord, in which all creatures breathe, thy magic flowing waters of deep love, thy sweetness give to me for earth and man. And this is the final and the highest realization of Ananda in this world. The transcendental enters into this world and makes it immortal. All relations become immortal. Now we see how Sri Aurobindo beautifully, poetically, very suggesting, in a very suggestive way, gave us these four boons, four great transformations. Here we can see them. So first there was a site of Dyumatsena and the kingdom, celestial kingdom of Dyumatsena, when the psychic comes to the front. Second was the oneness, which removed all the suffering because one sees oneself in all being and all beings in oneself. The third was the energy which could transform the world, the supramental manifestation, 100 suns from Savitri and Ashwapati and Satyavan. And that is something which was misunderstood in the story, because when she asks for 100 suns from Satyavan and herself, while Yama is taking away the life of Satyavan, it was interpreted as if Savitri cheated on Yama and asked for the boon, which he told her, choose any boon except the life of Satyavan, and she chose the 100 suns from Satyavan, which wasn't his life, as if she cheated on him, and it is not so, because the supramental manifestation is to take place before the immortality of the soul can be secured, can be activated. And that is the secret. She had to have the suns from Satyavan before Satyavan should become, as the soul of mankind, become immortal. And the final one is the joy in which all creatures breathe, this immortality. So if you look at Sri Aurobindo's yogic realizations, you will see the same four patterns of the same structure. We see his first realization of peace, of the silent Brahman, nirvanic experience, which he received from Vishnu Bhaskar Lele. And then he had immediately, in few years, he was in the Alipur jail and received the initiation into the cosmic consciousness, dynamic Brahman. And these two were the major realizations. Yeah. So you have these two, peace and then experience of oneness in many approaching hearts. And then the rest of his life with the mother, they were trying to bring the supramental down. And they are still working on it. So if we look at this final slide, which with which I will conclude my presentation, and we'll open then question and answer session at the end. So at the beginning of the story, what do we have? We have blind Dyumatsena who lost his kingdom because of his blindness. So he is blind and without the kingdom, but he has a son, Satyavan, who has no kingdom. Yeah, he is a prince without kingdom. We have suffering Ashwapati who has a kingdom but doesn't have a son, doesn't have a future. We have Savitri, his daughter, Ashwapati's daughter, who is unmarried. And this is, I didn't mention this, but she was so beautiful. Devakanya Eva. She was like divine maiden. And nobody even dared to ask her hand in marriage, because she was not only beautiful, but she was also truthful. She was true being, and everybody was afraid to marry her, because they felt that they are no match for her. And that's why Ashwapati told her to go and to find her own mate in the world. So when she went through all the world, she couldn't find him. She went through all the forests, met many rishis, met many kings, princes, and there was no match for her. And in Sri Aurobindo Savitri, there is a beautiful scene when they meet. She was ready to go back and to tell her father that she never found her a mate, match for herself. Then suddenly she stopped for a while and she felt a very fresh breeze coming from the edge of the forest. And then she saw a small figure approaching from the forest towards her. And then she saw him. And so he approached her and he said, "I am Satyavan." And they started to talk, and then she realized that it was him. So it's a very beautiful love scene when they speak to each other and explain who they are and what they mean to each other. And then so she was unasked. She was unwanted. The divine maiden, the divine mother was not asked, she was not useful for the world at the beginning. And Satyavan was destined to die in 1 year, dying Satyavan. So this is the beginning of the story. And when she marries him, what do we have? We have seeing Dyumatsena with a kingdom. We have Ashwapati with 100 sons, with a future manifestation of all his efforts, and spiritual transformation becomes possible. All the efforts become meaningful. We have married Savitri with 100 sons, a manifestation of the supermind, and the living Satyavan. And here I would like to stop. And maybe if you have some questions or remarks, you are most welcome.
Thank you, Vladimir. This was indeed a very, very enlightening talk. Usually, I don't take notes while listening to a talk, but it was so intriguing. It was really intriguing that I was like, okay, there is a beautiful matrix that is emerging out of your talk, and yeah, you just summarized the entire poetry in a matrix of 12 words. That is so beautiful. So, thank you, Vladimir. For everybody in the attendees in the audience, we would be taking questions towards the end. We would request you to put the questions in the Q&A box and not on the chat box. Towards the end, we would be taking questions. Now I move on to our next presenter today. I'd like to introduce Don Salmon. Don worked as a professional pianist composer in the 70s and the 80s in the New York City, performing with dancers, actors, and fellow musicians, as well as composing for theater, dance, and movies. He worked as a clinical psychologist for over 25 years, conducting research on lucid dreams and the use of mindfulness in the treatment of pain. Over the course of several decades, he has studied and practiced meditative and contemplative methods from various traditions, and with his wife, Jan Maslow, has written a book on the yoga psychology of Sri Aurobindo. When it comes to Savitri, Don encourages us to learn to listen to Savitri through the ears of infinity, hearing through the medium of our souls. While listening to music specially composed to facilitate this divine hearing, Don will take us just a few lines from Savitri and let us saturate our consciousness, immerse our consciousness, opening our whole being to the light, beauty, and mantric power of the poem. Please, Don, I'll turn it over to you now and look forward to this unique experiential exercise.
Thank you so much, Divyanshi. I want to thank Vladimir and Goutam also for their inspiring talks on Savitri and also for their evident love of and delight in Savitri. I'd like to invite us all to listen not just to Savitri, but to music and to all sounds as mantra. The Tibetan Buddhists have a wonderful, wonderful phrase: to see all sights as mandala, to hear all sounds as mantra. To see all sights as mandala is to effortlessly from your soul to see the divine web, the divine tapestry of all the colors and shapes of our lives as the radiant, luminous expression of divinity. And similarly, to hear all sounds as mantra is to hear every sound, even the sounds that our minds label as bad or ugly, to hear all sounds equally as expressions of that divine, radiant conscious energy. In the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna is about to reveal to Arjuna the cosmic vision, seeing all, literally seeing, feeling, hearing, knowing all as mandala, as mantra, as divinity, he says to Arjuna, "O Arjuna, O Prince, you cannot see me with these mortal eyes. Therefore, I will give you the divine eye. With this, you will see me in truth." So I'm sure many, if not most of you, know of the Mother's call, repeated call for us to step back from what Sri Aurobindo calls the crust of our outer nature, the crust of all our mental, vital stuff, hiding what is here always right now. This divine reality is as much here as it ever will be, and it is only that crust which seems to obscure it to us. So I'm going to read just briefly some of the words of the Mother in which she guides us which she refers to as a starting point, but it's a starting point for all of us beginners in finding the soul. And the mother says, the starting point is to seek in yourself that which is independent of the body and the circumstances of life. That which is not born of the mental formation you've been given, the language you speak, the habits and customs of the environment in which you live, the country where you are born, or the age to which you belong. You must find in the depths of your being that which carries in it a sense of universality, limitless expansion, unbroken continuity. Then you decentralize, extend, and widen yourself. You begin to live in all things, in all beings. The barriers separating individuals from each other break down. You think in their thoughts, vibrate in their sensations, feel in their feelings, live in the life of all. Everything is animated by a marvelous consciousness without time or limit. Vladimir, would you start the video? Thank you. So I'm going to invite you to listen to the music, not so much with your mind, but to feel the vibrations of the music. And you can feel them literally as you let go of the mind's labels and the mind's attempt or the vital's reactions. You may notice you begin to feel the music vibrating in your body. You can begin to feel it in your head, your arms. Notice the mind's reactions as the music is coming and going, as the mind's reaction, the vital reaction to Zoom or whatever. Let that all be part of the experience of hearing. You don't need to make any effort. There's no need for any effort to try to hear this way. There's simply the most gentle imaginable, the gentlest releasing of effort. As the poet Rumi told us, let your entire body become an ear. When we focus on sight, we tend to focus on what's in front of us. We have a very linear way of reacting. This strengthens our sense of separateness. The mother said the supramental hearing, the supramental consciousness, is spherical. Even if the music is soft, you can still feel it in your whole body. You can feel it all around you. Allow the breaking up of sound, allow the perhaps too soft sound. Allow that in equally. You can listen to the words I'm speaking without being concerned about the meaning, without being concerned about the sound, just letting your soul open to the entire experience. Notice there are sounds in your environment as well as sounds in the music. Let it all in. Let go of the mind and vitals reactions and let the soul embrace the entire experience. And now you will hear Savitri as she discovers cosmic spirit, cosmic consciousness. A voice began to speak from her own heart. A voice that was not hers, yet mastered thought and sense. As it spoke, all changed within her and without. All was, all lived. She felt all being one. The world of unreality ceased to be. There was no more a universe built by mind, convicted as a structure or a sign. A spirit, a being, saw created things and cast itself into unnumbered forms and was what it saw and made. All now became an evidence of one stupendous truth, a truth in which negation had no place. A being and a living consciousness, a stark and absolute reality. There the unreal could not find a place. The sense of unreality was slain. There all was conscious, made of the infinite. All had a substance of eternity. Yet this was the same, indecipherable. It seemed to cast from it universe like a dream, vanishing forever into an original void. But this was no more some vague, ubiquitous point, or a cipher of vastness and unreal naught. It was the same, but now no more seemed far to the living clasp of her recovered soul. It was herself. It was the self of all. It was the reality of existing things. It was the consciousness of all that lived and felt and saw. It was timelessness, time, was the bliss of formlessness and form. It was all love in the one beloved's arms. It was sight, thought, in one all-seeing mind. It was joy of being on the peaks of God. She passed beyond time into eternity. Slipped out of space and became the infinite. Her being rose to unreachable heights and found no end in its journey in the self. Thank you.
Thank you, Don, for this very beautiful experience. Sri Aurobindo calls poetry, art, and music the three most important means for the discovery of the soul. And very beautifully, when you bring together the transformative mantra of the poem Savitri with music and art, it really truly creates that fertile soil for the discovery of the psychic. Thank you very, very much. With that, we begin to open up to questions and answers. Please begin to put whatever questions that you have over chat. There is a question by Parashar. Wonderful presentations. Does Huta's paintings on Savitri, do they help more? I guess what he's trying to ask is, do they help in going deeper within? Vladimir, Dawn, would you like to respond?
I guess they help symbolically, like archetypal visions, and Mother instructed Huta how to do it, colors, how it was her visions. So she just implemented those visions in the way with guidance of the Mother and help and presence. So in a way they are charged with a particular spirit, yeah. You can see those beautiful exhibitions in Savitri Bhavan. They have originals. They are not big, they are small originals. At the end of our presentation, we will see a short kind of meditation with the Huta's paintings from Savitri. 5 minutes.
Yeah, I'll just say something about the question about the intellect. You may recall in Sri Aurobindo's writings on education and also in Synthesis, he speaks of different aspects of the intellect. The one that we're burdened with for much of the modern world is one I was speaking to during the presentation, that you may have noticed the Zoom is hard to carry both the music and the words, so it broke up. And our mind can come in and start criticizing and analyzing and trying to figure out what to do. But there's another aspect of the mind. It's a reflection of our intuitive mind. It's a reflection of a capacity in the supermind, which is capacity to see afresh, to see new, to see symbolically, which is actually a faculty of the mind that is not cultivated in our modern life. And I'll just add one more thing. This is very beautiful, and this is, to me, it's a sign of the influence of the supramental. Just this last year, a British psychiatrist, Ian McGilchrist, came out with a book in which he described the number one problem in the world today is the use of a part of the mind that sees everything as objects. And he says the solution, listen to this, how Aurobindonian this is to find that in the mind, that ability, which we all have, to grasp everything symbolically, metaphorically, as poetry. That this is actually coming forth now at this time. You can see this from the vital, you can feel it with your body, but you can also feel it with your mind integrally. And as the soul comes forth more and more and we open to inspiration, our mind becomes transformed and we don't have to abandon the intellect. It becomes a vehicle for intuition.
Thank you, Don. I'd also like to add just a little bit on the question about paintings. So I've been holding a course called Savitri painting, and in that, one of the things we do is we meditate on just one painting of Huta for an entire week, and sometimes 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, just meditating on that one painting of Huta. And I can tell you from our experience, from the experience of tens of participants who've been a part of the course, indeed, it is deeply, deeply transformative. Painting lines from Savitri, I feel, is one of the best methods of accessing the conscious force behind Savitri. With that, we would move on to the next question. This one is for Vladimir. The 4 original animations, are they corresponding to the Vedic images?
Right, absolutely. These emanations were, as Mother defines them, the consciousness in light. Yeah, so that is the Chit, what we know. Then there is, or Chit Tapas, power consciousness. Yeah, Chit Shakti. Then we have the bliss, which was fallen into the suffering, that is Ananda. So we have Chittapas Ananda, and then finally we have truth, which is Vijnana, the supermind itself, the link between the transcendental and this world. And then we have life. And life is interesting because the word is misleading. And it took me quite some time to really realize what it means and why life is the last, because the life is that eternal, infinite self-existence of the divine Sat. And so the Sat, the being which alone is falling the last in the grades of falling. First, all the components of Sat, his consciousness, his power, his bliss, have to fall to pull him down, as it were, because he can't be easily pulled down into death. He cannot easily die because he is the only one who is. So, and in that sense, of course, this gradation. And you find it also interestingly in the Bible. You know, who is tempting the... Adam is tempted by Eve. Eve is the consciousness which gives the apple to try. So before Adam falls, he has to be given the apple by Eve. Well, consciousness has to fall first. And moreover, they recover also in the same way. First, consciousness is to recover, then bliss, then truth. And that's what Mother did with conversions of asuras in her life, as you know her story. But also, very interestingly, when the Lord of Death, he realizes that he deals with the Divine Mother in Sri Aurobindo Savitri. He calls to these fallen emanations as his powers. And there is a beautiful description. Let me kind of give you this. This would be a full answer instead of short answer. But it may help to understand how they are all connected. Let me take this. And I will project for a second to answer this question. Here it is. So the Lord of Death invokes four asuras, four asuric emanations, powers of his own. He called to night, which is darkness, but she fell shuddering back. He called to hell, suffering, but sullenly it retired. He turned to the inconscient, that is falsehood, for support, from which he was born from that inconscient, his vast sustaining self, that is the self of death, the falsehood. It drew him back towards boundless vacancy, as if by himself to swallow up himself. And then he called to his strength, himself, that is him. Yeah? So if you look at and of course his spirit was devoured and he was destroyed. But if you look at these four personalities, it's quite interesting because they represent four counterparts, divine counterparts of these fallen emanations, which came to save them and to bring them back to their self-awareness. So we can see here the consciousness in light fallen with Dyumatsena. This is knowledge part, consciousness. Then we have power. Yeah, these two kings of knowledge and power. And then we have two children of knowledge and power, and that is Savitri and Satyavan, the self itself, the divine self, the representative of the divine here in the form of the soul of mankind. So we see knowledge, power, so to say, in a way. And that is something to contemplate upon. Yeah. I do not know, maybe I was carried away a bit.
Thank you, Vladimir. There's one question on chat, which Dawn, I guess, is already answered, but I guess it will also be good to answer. The question is, I had read somewhere wherein the mother mentioned that one can enter the domain of consciousness from the best of music is created, such as Beethoven's Ninth Symphony or some of the creations of Indian classical musicians. How do we enter that domain?
I love that question. That is so wonderful. There's no doubt that great music like Beethoven's Ninth Symphony or the greatest of Indian classical music can help us do that. But as I was saying in the talk, just as Savitri is perhaps the best vehicle of words to help us open to the supramental force and to the mantric power of sound, the sound of a bird chirping, even you may notice right now in your environment, are there any sort of apparently annoying sounds, mechanistic sounds, heaters, whatever? Those sounds too, what's important is not as much the sound, but where we hear from. So I'll tell you a little story of that. Many years ago, I was studying Prokofiev's piano sonatas when I was at conservatory, and I was studying Sri Aurobindo and the Mother too, yogic psychology. As Vladimir, I imagine, can tell you, Prokofiev had a very Russian spirit. His music was very powerful and vital. If you tuned into it, you could literally feel the vital realm coming through. The opening of the piece I was playing he'd actually written to imitate the sounds of bombs dropping during World War II. It's not hard to feel the domain from which that energy came from. But I remember I had been reading about planes and parts of the being, and I was getting to a place where Prokofiev is pounding on the piano, and suddenly this space opens up and the most beautiful psychic sweetness of this melody comes forward as only Prokofiev could write melodies. And when you tune into it, you could feel this had come through so clearly from the psychic domain. And you can practice. This is a wonderful practice, not just with music. As you walk around, listen to sounds. Let your attention widen. And notice you can feel in the body in different centers. You can feel in your being. This touches the mind. This touches the heart. This seems to, you'll hear some grunge music that seems to be touching some lower centers, and you'll listen to Beethoven's Ninth, and you can hear the glorious celestial melodies and lights. So this is a wonderful, wonderful practice. And again, listen to Savitri. You can hear the vibrations from which it comes. Such a joyful practice. Thank you for the great question.
Thank you. It was beautiful. Yeah. There is one more interesting it disappeared about the third. I wanted to answer that about the Savitri getting 100 sons before the life of Satyavan.
Shall I read it out, the question?
Yeah, if you could read it out, but it disappeared for some reason.
The question is, can you please throw more light on the fact that Savitri had 100 sons before Satyavan attained immortality? Did I hear that correctly, or I did not understand what you said?
Yes, you heard it correctly. And this is the puzzle. This is the whole conundrum of this story, which nobody could really solve. They thought that maybe she cheated on Yama, and that's why he couldn't but give her life of Satyavan in the next boon. But I don't think so. I think that the supramental manifestation is preceding the immortality. And that's why the Sri Aurobindo was looking for this. He caught the tail of the supermind, yes. They wanted to bring down the supramental consciousness on earth. And these sun-eyed pioneers, these are the 100 sons. This is a new race, new species. It's not the human race anymore. It's a divine race rushing down to be embodied here in nature. Nature is building up new species for us. It won't be this half beast, half divine, half god, half beast, as Sri Aurobindo says in Savitri. It would be a totally different type which nature is creating. And that is something which is to be effectuated before the immortality can be won. And this is the conundrum of the story, and also symbolically packing that secret which we will have to discover in the future. Yeah.
Thank you, Vladimir. There's one last question, and with that we will close. How metaphors give an experience of truth, liberation, and transformation in the context of Savitri? Both the panelists can answer. So maybe one line each from Dawn and Vladimir.
Vladimir, want to start?
Okay. Well, first of all, metaphors, symbols. Savitri, a legend and a symbol. So as a legend, we know it belongs to this Mahabharata, the story. But as a symbol, it is charged with many layers and many levels. It is like a holographic picture. Yeah, the whole integral yoga is visible through these four. We can see also the whole life of the mother, her work on these asuras and conversions of them. One by one, she met all of them. She worked on them. The Second World War was the war with this very Asura who called himself the Lord of Nations, the Asura of falsehood. he was the leader of this war. It was their war. We think that it was world war, but it was the war between the divine and the asura, who involved the whole humanity. So it is a much vaster. As a symbol, of course, it works on us and it kind of makes order in our mind that archetypically we can address these issues which are far beyond our everyday thinking and life. So how could we deal, as Sri Aurobindo says, with these realities, spiritual realities, other than through the symbols? We can't. These symbols are important for us because they are tuning our mind to look for the truth in the future. That's how they help us, I think, at least.
I wasn't sure I could add anything to this beautiful statement Vladimir just made, but when he spoke of tuning, my musical soul perked up, and I recalled Sri Aurobindo's line in Savitri, tuning the finite to infinity. And I realized as I heard that from Vladimir, I'm still resonating to the four boons, the peace, oneness, strength, and joy. And in that mantric divine listening that I spoke of, we can, in our hearts and our minds and our bodies, pay attention, not pay, open to being attentive every moment. Again, reading Savitri is special, but every moment when you leave this webinar and go about your supposedly mundane day, the Mother is gifting us at every moment. You can see every person, every ache and pain in the body, every annoying thought as an opportunity to tune in to what is that distorted symbol of, and then just step back, decentralize, universalize, and listen, and she'll tell you in the most beautiful, joyful way. Thank you.
What a beautiful way of closing today's webinar. With that, we have a couple of announcements followed by a beautiful group meditation. Tomorrow's webinar is on the theme of research of the soul of nations and national pavilions, one of the extremely important aspects of the Auroville design. We would have Anand Reddy, Matthew Andrews, and Soumitra Basu as the panelists, and the session would be moderated by Anu Lee Grant. With that, let us close our program today with a group meditation. Thank you everyone for being a part of today's session. Thank you, Vladimir. Thank you, Dawn.
ॐ तत्सवितुर्भरमरूपं ज्योतिः परस्य धीमहि यन्नः सत्येन दीपये सत्येन दीपये ॐ तत्सवितुर्भरमरूपं ज्योतिः परस्य धीमहि यन्नः सत्येन दीपये सत्येन दीपये तत्सवितुर्भरमरूपं ज्योतिः परस्य धीमहि यन्नः सत्येन दीपये सत्येन दीपये ॐ तत्सवितुर्भरमरूपं ज्योतिः परस्य धीमहि यन्नः सत्येन दीपये सत्येन दीपये
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Devi Shish.